Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. I came in tonight, I was like, I'm definitely not recording an episode tonight. And here I am, starting at 2:45 in the morning. So this will be my third UAP UFO episode in a month's time. So I just spent a couple hours, if not three, watching serious disclosure interviews. A lot of them from 2013, one from November 24th, 2020, at least published dates, that is. So this is the organization run by Dr. Stephen Greer. And with those interviews, as I've said several times, and I'll still hold to it, you get interviews where every time someone starts saying UFO or something really intense, they put their fingers in their ears, they rub their face all over. I saw one of those tonight. Then you get stories by people who are not in the military, but outside contractors helping out various maneuvers, who tell the most believable stories on planet Earth and who are hurt by revealing what they revealed. They make no money. They get harassed. They have been harassed since these events occurred in the past. And, they're usually gentlemen that would never use a swear word, and they, at points in the interview, get so frustrated with people questioning their credibility that they say, I don't give a goddamn what so-and-so says about what I have admitted. I definitely saw these things, and screw you. Like very passionate moments. Kenda, you got me started down this path today. Just watched an hour-long, painfully excruciating, interesting interview that he did November 24th, 2020 with this appears to be like a Native American soldier, Navy, who was scrambled in the middle of the afternoon / maybe morning, I don't know, to go out and pull a spacecraft that had been caught by a local fisherman in his net with a helicopter flying around that, obviously taking photographs or something, radioing it back to Guam. It was just south of Guam, where a bunch of sightings happen constantly. And he tells the whole story of going out to pick this thing up. He just happened to be one of 8 people that were allowed to actually participate in grabbing this thing out of the water. We're going to go through all this stuff. Another guy who was he's a pretty big face toucher in his interview. Claimed to work for an agency that directly served the CIA. He worked in supposedly Lockheed Skunk Works. The Skunk Works dude laid out tons of stuff, having supposedly worked on the SR-71, having been recruited into the Air Force, I guess. He was kind of weird on his, he said he was just going into college, and then all of a sudden he was working in this sort of Groom Lake Skunk Works project, but he's in Skunk Works, so as far as I understood, that's right, Patterson Air Force Base, but I guess you could be in various Lockheed Martin things. He just kept getting promoted, kept getting wink, wink, nudge, nudge by his, not his CO, but his CEO, or whoever he was reporting to, so you're about to get offered this project, you definitely want to get on it. Full claimed that he worked on the SR-71 and then joined the military, did 4-year term, doing some command of operations in Vietnam, never getting in the jungle, which might be why he's still alive. And then popping out and starting his own agencies, and kind of braggadocious kind of guy. Definitely had a lot of ear poking and ear grabbing and face rubbing and all that kind of stuff as soon as something got in there. The angle in this episode is very simple. I'm going to call this UFO World. What that means to me is we have always been sort of interpreting all of this UFO stuff. Now, again, the stuff I saw tonight was, and there was actually an urgent thing, I think on April 7th this year from Dr. Stephen Greer saying that they're coming up with this cosmic event. This cosmic threat, And I suppose he's about to come out with a documentary here. But that the military has reverse engineered captured vehicles and that they have been flying them around, and they are going for the Werner von Braun, who he keeps calling Brown, Werner von Braun's communication to his assistant in 1974, which I guess is the year that he actually told her that they're going to try to create an imminent threat situation, that this whole sort of space Star Wars shield that was put up in the late 80s, which it was, because a buddy of mine programmed on it, that we don't want to do that because that's not weapons to protect against missiles going from country to country, supposedly. It is to fire upward. Now, what I'm going to do with this episode is I'm going to bring you a lot of stuff that I have been told personally by people that were involved at bizarre levels, meaning sometimes not directly involved, sometimes directly involved. And then a bunch of the stories that have been kind of bouncing around these disclosure interviews, which again, I believe some of them wholeheartedly, which for me absolutely confirms the existence of UFOs and the existence of beings from other worlds, but also that we can fake those things. So what, again, Stephen Greer said was that, look, there's a bunch of these vehicles we've created, and I'm going to light this up with a nice moment of disclosure that I think you guys will find interesting. I got to kind of blind this a little bit. Let's just say someone that I'm not that far away from, and this information came to me very recently. Someone I associate, I guess I'm 2 degrees from this person, was at Area 51 in the last 12 months, so within the last year, and saw a vehicle take off with a bunch of other people watching off one of the runways. It just went up and then went bam and took off exactly like the UAPs that are being reported on TV. So, to Dr. Stephen Greer's point, he is absolutely correct. We do have these vehicles, and obviously this wasn't the first time. And sort of makes me feel comfortable that our ability to deduce logic is use our logical brains to deduce whether or not they have this or not. Because again, the narrative on the outside is we definitely don't have this technology. Now, there have been times when this stuff has been claimed to be in our technical circles where people inside are like, no way. But that's because it was several years ago. People like Bill Cooper seeing ships go into the ocean, 1967, I think that was the year. Yeah, probably 67. That probably makes sense. And then, of course, anything in this century, we sort of need to believe that that's possible. Now, remember, I keep telling you that my buddy Sid Mead, who's now passed, kept getting visited by some top military brass guy who kept bragging that we had completely and utterly figured out anti-gravity and that we don't use any spinning Mercury Tauruses or anything like that. Well, apparently, that might be true. And again, Sid was hired in the 80s to do some renderings of an aircraft that they couldn't tell him what it looked like, but they kind of told him what it looked like, and they couldn't show him any pictures. And he got it so correct that they kind of were like, who showed him the pictures, you know? And I think if you just search up like Sid Mead, I'll try to find it, Sid Mead aircraft, like jet or something, you'll see it's a black sort of stealthy looking craft. Very man-made, very pilot in the cockpit kind of thing, right? As far as the Star Wars things goes, I've said this a couple of times, but we're right on this, and I haven't said it recently. So it's important to add this to the DNA. One of my closest friends in the entire world, who the movie War Games was actually written after, because he had done some incredible hacking into every agency that you could hack into from the age of 9 to 17. Finally, at 17, he breaches the top security agency in the world. And he gets a choice, either go to jail or work for us. The gentleman who wrote that movie was his neighbor. Apparently, the way the conversation goes is that his father was asked, hey, where's your son? I don't see him around anywhere. He's like, yeah, well, he's kind of working for them right now. He worked for approximately 10 years on the Star Wars Shield, programming in Lisp, to program the AI that goes for these satellites. Like I told you, I have held in my hand a very, very detailed schematic of one of these satellites, and they are serious businessmen. They rotate lasers to chop up missiles. I didn't see anything in there that would probably hurt any of the vehicles we're talking about. So this seemed very legit, but he said that they deployed it, and there's all kinds of different layers of this shield. There's ones that they can take with bombers, and they got missiles, basically rockets underneath that can either they're attached or they deploy from like a missile bay, and they just end up firing it up into space, and then it could get into orbit really, really quickly. So that's very real. Guarantee it. Those of you who don't think satellites exist, I can say is brace yourself, man. Again, doesn't negate a lot of other things. But this stuff seems to be pretty damn serious. So there's the whole basis of this foundation I'm going to try to build on is there seems to be quite a bit of evidence that we have been visited in the past, right? That a lot of us, if not every single one of us, came from one of these. Now it's up to at the 2001 thing they did for Project Disclosure, which is now Serious Disclosure. It was said that 27 species exist. The guy that just rattled off and said that we essentially built flight simulators for their vehicles with the help of 2 of these grays, that there's only 12 races that are in our area, at least. But there is definitely a race that looks just like me, apparently. But there's a redhead race, there's a blonde-haired race, and then I don't know what else. I don't know. We know grays are in the mix, right? If everyone's telling the truth. But that they are in some areas supposedly in the hills of Utah, and that there are literally hills in Utah that can transform, and there are whole cities in these mountains up in Utah. It started with a W. I couldn't remember what it was, but for those of you who live in Utah or know it really well, throw some W areas at me. But supposedly there's a whole fleet of beings in there with their aircraft, and they have their weaponry in there as well. So Dr. Stephen Greer's point, everyone who ever talks about this, and I mean everyone who ever talks about this, says, look, if they meant us harm, then this would have been done a long time ago. They could own this planet in 2 seconds. I completely agree with that at this point, but that they are going to create an event where they're going to do some sort of September 2001 thing, create some damage, make it responsible, or put the responsibility on our aircraft such that we completely fund this space shield, which has weaponry pointed outward or can nail anything that's coming in. But now imagine that we have been led to believe, we need to go through this exercise, people, that we've been led to believe that if they ever were here, they're gone, for one thing. And this dude said that it's so funny because we just did our Giants and Pygmy episode, right? And the Native Americans always talk about the people that came before them being giant, more Caucasian, humans. I don't know why. But he said, he didn't mention anything about these giants or anything, but he said, that the Native Americans up there have graves of these individuals and that they are 7 foot plus blonde-haired and red-haired beings. And that's all he said. But he said that the Native Americans have been entrusted with the visitations of these individuals because they respect it. And that they're very kind tribes up there in Utah. Too bad the aliens couldn't save the Shoshone Indians from the Mormons, right? So I have a very close friend of mine, and for those of you OG listeners, you've heard every episode, this will now connect for you too. Buddy of mine. Famous video game guy. Won't say his name. I met him at Sid Mead's party at the Kentucky Derby party And Sid literally just said, you two guys have to sit down and talk. And sure enough, he and I became immediately good friends. And he's a guy that I've told you guys a lot of DMT stories, especially where I have a friend that took his last trip and he said that the gray alien that was his escort in all of his previous trips put his nose right on his nose and just stuck his face right in his face. And he said, it was nice having you here, but you need to go back home and stop coming here. You're not welcome here. You're not supposed to be here. And he said, this is a grown man, handsome, rich as shit, brilliant dude. Goes, I never wanted to be home more in my life. Very humble guy too. Extremely humble. But he was, the subject of the moon missions came up and he's like, he said, you don't think we went to the moon? I said, no. I said, doesn't mean we haven't gone since with something we don't know about, which we're going to talk about in this episode. But Apollo missions? No way. He says, well, I think we did. But he didn't have any other theory. He didn't say, I think there's a secret, thing and all this other stuff. He didn't do anything like that. He just had that hunch, had that feeling, had the romantic, story behind it. But then he proceeds to tell me something that was phenomenal. And now, 10 years later at least, I'm sitting there going, he's talking about stuff that they're all talking about today. Except he had it firsthand. He was involved in some design work. He was into 3D before everybody else, like in the 80s. And so he was doing some 3D renderings of facilities that were being made by the military. Fairly top secret stuff, I guess, but he didn't have to have, according to the story, he never told me he had gotten any level of super special clearance to do what he was doing. But he was an independent guy, I think, is the way he told the story. But apparently they'd taken old missile silos from the past and had retrofitted them to create what's called a plasma gun. Where this big Titan rocket might be, it's gone. And they have these units all the way around on all the different floors. And he wasn't quite sure exactly how it worked, but he had a 3D model of this thing. And it would spray a gas in the center just think of how gasoline is spritzed inside of a piston cylinder, right? And then electricity hits this thing and a gigantic plasma beam goes shooting into the sky. And so he's working on this thing and he said, he couldn't make it out. He's like, what the hell is this thing for? What the hell is this thing for? And so he eventually, I guess, was able to visit the facility. He said that everybody was just sweating. Quite literally in a high blood pressure, tense situation constantly. And he's like, what is this thing for? And some guy goes, it's a weapon, man. It's a plasma beam weapon. He's like, okay, kind of gathered that from my work, but who are you going to shoot this thing with? And he said, only thing to do when it was them, and pointed straight at the sky. He ain't talking about Russians. He ain't talking about anybody else. No one was even formidable at the time but the Russians. So he told me in this pool conversation, he said, look, man, we built a weapon that's supposed to be shooting UFOs. At the time he told me the story, I was thinking, well, this dude is not the slightest bit unintelligent. So I'm just going to put that on that maybe shelf in my pantry in my brain, and I'll find if there's a place for it later on. Now, since then, thinking about the fact that you have to aim a weapon, the only thing they got to do is make sure that their UFO doesn't fly over this weapon and you'll never get hit. But maybe it's just a test. Or maybe, I don't know, through some reflection, through some other technique, maybe there's, you fire it up a particular way in a particular sequence and you get the thing to come out of the hole a little bit. And so maybe it's got like a little bit of a circumference that it can shoot. I don't know. Still seems pretty easy to avoid if it's stuck in the ground, but maybe again, it's just a test bed thing. For all we know, it is the actual internal design of a satellite that might be in space, very low orbit, but just capable of rotating and shooting this thing out, which is what the satellite my buddy worked on did. And, there were several models of the one that my friend worked on. He said the very first time they tested the laser technique on a missile, it just shot a hole right through the missile, and the missile still reached its destination. So they realized they needed to put multiple lasers on and rotate them to physically chop up the ICBM. Otherwise, it's going to reach its target. So then there was this Guam kid. It's a 1-hour interview with Dr. Stephen Greer, and it is the most painful thing I've ever seen in my life, besides the kids talking for the Michael Jackson hit piece, right, from HBO. They talked really slow, really. This kid is the slowest talker on planet Earth. Can't make a point. Literally, he talks about one thing for 5 minutes, and Dr. Stephen Greer is just sitting there going, okay, we got it. Oh, no, yeah, we got it, So I'm taking one for you, let me tell you. So he's on this naval boat, which does buoy maintenance. And it's a really old ship that's been replaced since he did this, which I guess is like 2003 or something like that. And they get this call that they got to go out to this boat. And so they're 20 miles south of Guam. He said that as they took the boat out, they could see a fisherman's boat out there with a helicopter. They get to the ship, and they notice in the water this big disc that's stuck in this net. Immediately, everyone's told to go downstairs. And all the communications are turned off. Someone comes by and puts cardboard on all the portal windows inside the ship so no one inside can see what's on the outside. And I can imagine someone just kind of peeking on the other side. 6 officers / divers are pulled up. He's a non-commissioned officer with another non-commissioned officer. He said he was an E4, his buddy with an E6 or something like that. And they go up above, and these are the only two guys allowed on the deck. Everyone else, there's 2 guys that get off on the boat to go over to the fisherman boat because they won't stop. They're not going very fast, but they won't stop. And so eventually they managed to get him to slow down. I mean, just pull out money. That's the only thing I can think of. If you can't talk the language, just say dinero, man. Whatever native language that needs to be in. But they stop. And then they've got this disc. I'm just going to recap the story in like 2 minutes, which took this guy a fucking hour to tell. Unbelievable. Pardon my French today. So real quickly, they get it to stop. They cut the net away, and this thing's just buoyant in the water. Now, why you would cut that out and then test to see if it's buoyant first is beyond me. Like, you should see if it's buoyant first. So anyway, they cut across the net. Then they realize they don't have anything to grab this 25 to 30 foot disc, which has a larger kind of disc shape on top and a slightly half the distance bowing on the bottom. So it's got a slightly thicker top, almost like a serving dish, right? But very round. He said it was flat gray, didn't reflect light that much, perfectly smooth, uninjured, no points of entry on this thing, no seams, no rivets or anything like that. But they don't have anything to pull out something like that out of the water because all the buoys have hooks or have like these loops that they can hook on, right? So they took a bunch of the kind of fiber netting that they use for ladders to throw off the edge when someone has to go diving, and they strung a bunch of these things together because they got a bunch of this material. They wrapped this whole thing up like a Christmas present and then hoisted onto the ship. Now, he said there's 2 weights to the buoys, 14,000 pounds and 18,000 pounds, and that's what their little crane is set up to do. When they pick up an 18,000 pound one, obviously it's 4,000 pounds heavier, and the ship usually tilts as a result of picking up any one of those. He said that the ship turned 45 degrees, like almost capsizing. This thing was so heavy, which is interesting. Like, you would think it would be a little less heavy if it had any amount of its motor turned on, right? As described by a lot of people like Bob Lazar and all these other folks, right? They swing this thing on. He said he was the first person to touch it. He said he even knocked on it, heard this kind of real deep bell to it. And then he said that, because Dr. Stephen Greer said, did you try to scratch it? Now, I don't know why the hell you would try to scratch it. Doesn't seem intuitive to me, but apparently for them it was very intuitive. He said they have these 4 giant weights that they use to hold things down and to basically balance the ship. And every once in a while when they move them, they chip off a little piece of it. So he grabbed a piece of one of those off the deck And apparently with a couple other guys, they tried to scratch it, and he said they couldn't make a dent in this thing. He said the thing looked absolutely flawless, no damage whatsoever. Then they tarp the thing over. Then they go back to shore. As soon as they get to shore, he said there's a huge contingency of camouflage guys, which is not very common for their facility. And then there were some Navy folks with a lot of other Air Force brass. They tell everyone to get off the ship. So this thing's completely covered up. Everyone gets off the ship. And he says it's very atypical because as soon as you dock the ship, there's a huge cleaning ritual that has to happen. And he goes, they basically got the night off and everyone takes off. Next morning, he and his buddy, the E6, gets pulled into a debriefing with a Navy admiral in there. 1 or 2 stars, he said. His CO, a couple other guys. The Navy admiral was the guy that did most of the talking. He told the 2 guys that this thing was some covert Navy technology, to which the CO of the guy said, bullshit. That's bullshit. Apparently named off like 4 or 5 other ones. And he said, look, we see these things so much we got to tell our soldiers that they're going to see this stuff. We see it all the time. Daytime, no problem. And the guy said, well, I'd be happy to talk with you later. They signed an NDA saying basically that the events of the previous day never occurred. You're not to talk about it. Okay, so he's kind of a junior guy at this point, and he's definitely nervous about getting court-martialed. He kind of had a bunch of Men in Black visions about them trying to, clean his memory, kill him, all kinds of stuff, court-martial him up to the point of treason and. So he lived with this stress inside his system. He said his CO went and talked to the general, then he went and talked to his CO. He said the CO never got any more information. There was never proven that this was an evil technology. Nobody buys that story in the first place. Now, what would be really interesting to know is how the hell did this fishing boat get a hold of this thing in a net? I mean, apparently it must have crashed in the water, floated, and then the net goes by and grabs it. And then who the hell knows that it's there? The fact that the helicopter even found this thing does yield to the admiral's story that it is a Navy vehicle that simply wrecked. But boy, it must have been built out of a bunch of technology that we didn't invent initially, is all I can say if that's the case, right? But that's just the first half of this. It's actually the first 50 minutes of this clip. This last 10 minutes, Dr. Stephen Greer goes, well, why don't you tell me about the guy that you ran into on base, the Special Forces guy that said he was doing space travel. And I'm like, what? I'm just ready for this interview to be over, right? And he said that he bumped into some Special Forces guy who had just ordered his first beer and that he looked really super down. And this is a few years later, I guess. Knowing what it's like to hold all this information in and how much it disturbs you, you can't talk to your spouse, you're not even supposed to talk to the other guy that you had the experience with because someone could overhear you, right? He says, what's anything I can do for you? Well, how you feeling? What's going on? He doesn't know this guy. He said the guy hadn't had really much to drink at all. Still working on his first beer, he said. He said, what would you do if I told you I just got back from the moon? And he's, I guess, really disturbed. And I guess he said he quipped back, well, that's great. That's funny. You'd ask me that because I just got back from Mars. And he said the guy just almost cut him off because he's like, that's not funny. So he said, okay, well, lay it on me here, man. I'm an open-minded guy. I'm not going to shit on your story, and you wouldn't believe what I would believe at this point in my life. And all he would admit that he goes, well, I just spent 2 weeks on the moon. That's all he would say. Okay. And this dude's green, man. I mean, this dude is not built for telling tall tales. The only thing that we could say about this guy, if this was a concocted story, was he is a MK Ultra child, that they stuffed the story in his brain. That's the only way this could come out of a guy that could barely speak in a fluent sentence manner. He must be in his 30s or something like that. I'd say almost... Well, if he was enlisted, he was 19 when he gets on. In 2001, he said, maybe he's 40. Looks really young. I think he's Native American because he looks like a very close friend of mine from the Midwest who's almost, I think, 100% full-blooded. Seemed very genuine to me. Another story, this professor guy who was in charge of some optics for a Titan missile launch, I believe that's the right missile, he said that all he was supposed to do was just track and shoot with a camera the rocket taking off, because it was new to have a rocket going several thousand miles an hour and still keep a camera on it and keep zooming in at the rate it's taking off, and there's other vehicles from bombers that are shooting it from other cameras and that kind of thing. And apparently all he can see from his camera is the third stage section blowing out a huge plume. And then of course it cuts that one off, goes to the next stage, and then eventually makes low orbit. He took the whole thing and turned in his footage, thinking he was going to be just going on to the next assignment. The next day he gets brought in by his CO, who shows him the footage that they took. And what he claimed, and many of you will know this story, but his interview, as Kenda will attest to, is 100% believable. I mean, he says that his commander showed him that while this thing was going, it had a dummy warhead in it, not a real one, but it was trying to hit an island just to see if they could deliver it properly, right? The UFO basically shows up, a saucer UFO, and it's caught up with this vehicle going, I guess, about 4,500 miles an hour, and it's just perfectly moving with it, and it's flying, in a respective speed, at like zero speed, which means it's going exactly the same speed of this ever-increasingly fast rocket. That it looks around it, and it hits it with a beam, moves around, hits it with a beam, another beam, and finally the head of this rocket just starts tumbling off of the rocket as it continues going. But of course, by that point, the rocket starts turning and you can't see the nose cone anymore, so the footage is then releasable to the public because you can't see anything. He said that someone came in and said, you're not to ever admit you never saw this footage. They took the reel, found the first frame, or a few frame, first frame of the UFO, went back a few inches, cut it. Last frame of the UFO, went forward a few inches, cut it. Rolled that up on a little can, put it in a briefcase, made everyone sign these NDAs, and the guy can splice the two ends together and he can air that. And he said, that's it. You never saw this, forget about it. And this guy, I guess, he said that they would call I'm going to use dirty words because this is what he said literally on the interview. And he's not a guy that talks like this. You can just tell. He got a nice groomed beard. He's a professor. He said he'd get phone calls where they were like, something like, we're going to get you, motherfucker. We're going to get you. And he said that was like the first 10 years of his life, calling his house. He said he'd go way out in the wilderness with his wife in his cabin, and they'd still call that. He said they blew up his mailbox one day, and then we'd call him afterwards. And he says in the last 10 years, they call and just hang up on him. There's a tone on the phone, and then they hang up on him. Just totally intimidating this guy not to say his story. Well, now he's totally disclosed his story. There's nothing more to it at this point. So chasing him around is sort of a joke. But it's sort of the punishment, I guess, for saying something. But the Skunkworks guy was sort of interesting because he starts to pull in just every romantic story we've ever heard. He talks about President Eisenhower really taking the stance on how to handle these crashed aircraft. They talk about Roswell, and he says, look, Roswell was real, completely 100% real, and that he reiterates the claims that we got fiber optics from that, we got silicon chips from that. What else did we... Kevlar vests, and these are like derivative technologies from other things that they found, and that night vision was also something that they found. That they sort of the budding technology, we do with it what we can sort of thing. Now, again, for my money, we have always known that glass transmits light at the speed of light. Every kid who's ever had a glass coffee table will take the flashlight and hit it and notice it blows up the room. You're like, whoa. So that wasn't missed by anyone. In terms of silicon chips being layered, once you find silicon's conductive, and when exposed to light can burn, you get the same principle of automatic transmission, the big giant block with a bunch of anthills in it and you just pressurize it to move gears and that sort of thing. They're all ingenious things, but no one would say that the automatic transmission block comes from Roswell. But that thing is as equally brilliant as a CPU. It really is, because a CPU, once you figure out how to burn a transistor into a CPU, you got the whole thing. Everything else is less complicated than the transistor model. We have done a tremendous amount of leakage optimization and conductivity optimization, trying to get a sub-micron optimization, but all that's been above board since we've been alive. So I don't buy a lot of that. They used to say Velcro came from it. I mean, it's just, I don't know. My last investor was a guy about the age of the Skunkworks guy. My investor used to talk about Skunkworks all the time. He's a wannabe, I think, Skunkworks guy. My investor, that is. But there's sort of a generation that talks a particular way, and if you're very observant in human behavior, you'll notice these kind of folks. You're like, oh yeah, that's that kind of intellectual guy, truly intellectual, obviously very brilliant in whatever they do. But if they want to take on a narrative of something, they tell the story in a very distinct pattern that you can literally group, and you can guess what year they're born, you know? And you have to take into account everything they saw on television when they were kids, what kind of laser guns were offered on TV after the sci-fi show they just watched, what cereals they were sold, when they saw Star Trek, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Forbidden Planet, all those things, right? But the Skunkworks guy never said that we went to the moon. I think that was very interesting. But what he did say was that Neil Armstrong was in those Utah hills and supposedly ran into that base here on Earth with all these individuals there. Now, what doesn't make any sense to me about that is that plenty of human beings roam the world now. But like even foreigners, they get a better view of America when they intelligently understand that crossing our land is a very romantic, beautiful thing. Just like we feel the same way when we go there and look at all their groomed, planet, their fields and, the Italian vineyards and Rome and the beautiful hills of Switzerland and that kind of stuff. So I would think that a lot of travelers would bump into this place. Maybe they just keep the door shut. I don't know why they would specifically open it for Neil Armstrong. Apparently he went up with a bunch of scientific equipment, which is the catalyst in the story as to why he was allowed in to meet these folks, and that they told him specifically, get the F out of here, you're not supposed to be here. But the ecosystem that's built now with a lot of these stories from different people is that they're here and they've been here for a long time. That they're not trying to get discovered necessarily. Why they're fiddling around in the ocean, why they're only chasing Top Gun pilots. We had a big conversation at my lounge today with brand new people there, a couple. And they were very good, down to earth, salt to the earth people. We didn't know who they were, whether or not they were conspiracy people. They live in a very liberal part of California and they're very conservative, which means dead center. Not extreme right, not extreme left. And they had picked up on the fact that the UAP thing is always only in military airspace, military this, military that. Now, part of it is citizens don't sit around running around in the ocean. So stuff over the ocean, maybe that's the reason why. But I saw a couple interviews tonight where one guy talked about an event where he was working, he was in a missile command center, and that a red light had shown up, a craft had shown up at the gate. It was just over the gate. All the security men had run up with their weapons, just like Forbidden Planet men. And that they called him, he's down on the ground. And they called him and said, hey, sir, we got this red light up here, and this is crazy. And, I got to go. One of my men has been injured. And he's like, okay, I'll be back with you in just a second. So he goes and wakes up his commander, who's taking a nap on this cot because they take shifts. And he's like, what the hell are we supposed to do? And he's like, oh my God, okay, just hold off. I got to make phone calls too. But out of several missiles, of which he would never give the total, He said 6 to 8 of them were turned off. And he thinks it had to do with the guidance system was corrupted somehow. At the same time, he said that a bunch of their perimeter securities, which is probably laser-based, just like your garage door, when you stand in the way, when it's coming down, it'll go back up again, that there had been a lot of breaches at the border of their security perimeter. Basically saying that while you're looking at the red dot, something went down inside and hit these things with perhaps some sort of electromagnetic field to break them. Be some really wild, they move the speed of light or something, I don't know. But that it already happened a week before to a different base where every single missile was turned off. And then it happened a week after at a different place. So in the early 60s, they were running around turning a bunch of stuff off. This guy had paperwork that he had his ex-CO confirm this because they're all retired now. And he said, they're all corroborating their stories at this point, saying, look, I haven't made any money off this whole thing. This has not been something that's gone down well with us. And he said a lot of the guys that were out there trying to point guns, apparently one of them was severely injured, and they won't tell us how. I mean, what are you going to do? Go up and touch it? They're not going to fire until they get permission to fire. And what would be the point? I mean, I just think that any grown adult, I think maybe that was in the late 60s. The Skunkworks guy had several stories like that as well. But regardless, you've already seen sci-fi movie after sci-fi movie. If you're staring at a UFO, you're not going to fire a bullet at it. That's just common logic, man. Obviously, they're light years ahead of you, to quote a metaphor incorrectly. But then that guy went ahead and did more research after he saw his missiles get deactivated, and it just turned out that this had started happening all over the place the second we started playing with nuclear weapons. Of course, Dr. Stephen Greer's opinion about this, as voiced in his videos, is that when we blow up one of these bombs, that it affects more than just the planet Earth. That's, I think, an assumption. Could be. Not sure why. I just think the blue marble, if that's what we're truly on, is so precious that, they could have helped incubate it, build it. And again, things like pyramids showing up after the hieroglyphs, because they're not in the hieroglyphs, the idea is, why wouldn't someone put markings on them and that kind of thing? And the situation is, maybe it served a weird purpose that was anything but what we thought it was officially. And that they knew that, don't put any markings on it because we're not supposed to tell them we're here. We'll just let it be a wonder of the world sort of thing, right? And then it's on the dollar bill with the eyeball on it, right? So it's almost like someone figured this out a long time ago, or even recently, because that's only about 100 years old on American money. And they're just usurping something that's phenomenal. If you found something in your backyard that was from a UFO, you don't necessarily have to know anything about it, but if it's beautiful, you could start embedding it in your artwork and sort of feel like, well, if we talk about it a lot, maybe they'll show back up again or something. So I just watched a movie called 3 Days with the Condor, which I guess is based on a book called The 6 Days with the Condor. It's got Robert Redford in it. It's just got an absolutely star-studded cast. But the whole movie is about uncovering an intelligence agency inside of an intelligence agency. Watching it, it's 1973, watching it today is actually phenomenal because it's got a lot of modern interiors, but it's not like space age interiors. It's just super modern New York architecture. It's really beautiful to watch. And the offices of the world hadn't gone really terribly computer oriented, except there's a couple computer rooms in this, which takes it up, and it's, reel to reel sort of storage facilities and that kind of stuff. But it was about a division of book readers that try to find hidden messages in books that potentially countries pass between each other. And that he had translated something, sent it up through command, didn't think anything of it. And it ended up exposing a mystery that I'll let you digest. But the one thing I can reveal that won't ruin the movie for you is that he talks about a CIA inside the CIA. And with what we know today, obviously that's the case, right? There's always a pyramid. In a pyramid structure, you got the capstone that's completely different than the rest of the situation. Every Mason who's ever become a 33-degree Mason who doesn't like what they see, they do those videos on YouTube where they say, man, it's dark at the top, man. And everyone down below thinks they're part of just a brotherhood of about God, and at the top it's the complete inverse. And so you're being lied to. I don't know if any of that's true. I don't have any proximity to that. My grandfather was I guess you could say a small town Mason, right? Which means they knew nothing. They drove weird cars during parades, raised money most likely to send back to, I guess, Topeka, Kansas is the Kansas headquarters. I need to send them money to get my grandfather's records as to what he was. But I doubt anybody in my hometown was a 33-degree Mason. Maybe one guy, maybe. Definitely not my grandfather. But he's got like a pentagram on his goddamn tombstone. So sad. So I want to get back to like Dr. Stephen Greer's thing of the cosmic threat model, because it's very, very interesting. When this letter movement was asked whether or not we went to the moon, he said yes, but not with the missions that you saw. It was with a secret group. Okay, so everyone's like, really? Give me a break. Now, with this dude in Guam talking to this guy at some, local bar on base, I think it was on base, saying, man, would you believe me if I said I was up there for 2 weeks? And he's just destroyed. He's just in a weird state, which means, I don't know why you wouldn't come back happy. Yeah, let's just say you got to keep it a secret. Hey, man, send me to the moon. I won't come back droopy and, oh, gosh, I can't tell anybody. It's like, give me a break. You know how much shit I don't tell people? I keep that a secret just fine. I just want to see the earth from far away. Apparently, with a lot of these people telling stories, is that they're basically saying that we find these things around the world, that common people like us do see them, but they get to them. Apparently it's not too difficult to get people to be quiet. I think people do like being alive as opposed to being dead, and just seeing something. It's one of these things. If somebody said, I don't know, it'd be kind of weird, right? If someone's like, you bump into like, I think if you bump into certain clandestine projects where they're going to kill off a bunch of people, if you see it, you're just dead. There's not going to let you go. But with one of these sort of things, it's kind of like, well, we're very close to disclosing this to the whole world. Why knock somebody off and cause ourselves potential problems? Just, is that cool, right? You saw it, right? Okay, no, you didn't see it. You good with that? Okay, good. And you realize if you do say something, then you're going to have a bunch of problems. With the Roswell people, you had people getting killed simply because they saw it, weren't told it was top secret because nobody was there of any command to make them sign a non-disclosure. They went home and told their family, their husband and their wife, their husband and kids, boy and girl, I believe, who then went to school the next day and said, oh my God, we saw a UFO. Now, that lady was killed within the year, Dorothy Kilgallen style, in a hotel room, registered sister, and it's the whole Marilyn Monroe death, right, which is the Dorothy Kilgallen death. Drugs and alcohol mixed improperly killed this person, right? Supposedly, and her best friend is the one that told the story in a chair, sobbing eventually, and she was just kind of like mentally disturbed that her government could do that, because this is the 40s, even though the interview was done, I think, in the 80s. That's why you just can't fake those things. Coming from a little town, I'm telling you, the people I saw in these interviews about Roswell, they're my people. I mean, it's Roswell, New Mexico, but what is that, like 600 miles from my hometown? Still a small community. There's just a whole different standard. When you grow up in the city, you're so used to people lying all the time, cheating all the time, stabbing you in the back to get ahead, that, yeah, I understand why you don't believe anybody talking. But when you're in a little country town, you can't lie. How are you going to tell a lie when everybody knows everything that you ever did and they were standing next to you when it happened? Yeah, you can see you caught a fish this big, but people are going to be like, hey, he's got the story now. Your Uncle Bob, when he said the same story, yeah, whatever. So it's just the boy will call wolf kind of thing. You can't lie. You can't cheat on your girlfriend. Where are you going to take her in town? You're going to take her out of town every single year. You're going to constantly drive out of town. Someone's going to see you driving out of town every day and coming back in at 2 a.m. And the woman who runs the Johnson's general store is going to be like, I don't know why he keeps driving out this time. I see his car. I know he's the only one who owns that car. You can't lie. You just can't. If you come from a big city, understand why you do not understand that genetic. So let's just give credence and go through this for a second. They are here. They have been here for a very, very long time. They made friends with various folks who aren't involved with government, perhaps, like the Native American story. Totally believe that. Or I can believe that, but that way. We've got enough monolithic structures on Earth to know that kind of makes sense that some stuff was built that we don't understand. Now, why these folks are building Machu Picchu, pyramids, don't know if Stonehenge is a part of that, but a lot of other structures in the world. I mean, staying here and building beautiful things, that's interesting. What's interesting about the pyramids and the basalt boxes is that they seem like very functional and not, even though beautiful and precise, like that tub underneath that step pyramid, the most precise box on planet Earth, built by man. Built by somebody here on Earth. Well, what if they're just trying to solve basic problems? They're building a city here to then imbue us with all this knowledge, and then eventually they're going to leave. They're not telling the story about how they built this stuff. They're not writing their messages on walls necessarily because they're like, we're not supposed to do that. That's a prime directive violation. Okay. Donald Trump put together Space Force. Most of us interpret that as protecting space above the United States of America, both from a missile shield standpoint to a communication satellite standpoint, because if we put communication satellites up there, we do not want under any circumstance someone to be able to build another one that flies up and knocks all of ours out of the sky. We want to be able to disable our enemy and whatever, declare peace, declare war, whatever we want to do. Makes sense. June 25th, they are supposed to drop this report to Congress about all the UFO stuff. So we're a few weeks out. Dr. Stephen Greer says that that's going to be delayed because apparently there's a faction that says, do not build a shield, a weapons shield over the United States. That's part of von Braun's big thing was that 1974, he's telling his assistant, they're going to try to build this shield up there, and that we're never to do that. We're never to keep them out because then we're drawing fire from them because they have had ubiquitous access to the Earth. Now, one of the things you have to understand, I think when I did the calculation of the surface module plus lunar module mass, or at least cubic space, that the Earth is somewhere like 3.6 billion times bigger than those two vehicles attached to each other, which is why escaping Earth's gravity is very funny, in my opinion, without a true anti-gravity system. Anti-gravity doesn't give a shit what's next to it. It doesn't care how much gravitational force. It can easily leave any gravitational envelope created by the negative pressures of ethereal winds. And what's funny is all these skunkwork guys, all these dudes talking about the technology that we discovered and pierced and figured out was, they keep saying, well, we're using the natural force, the natural energy from the Earth to propel ourselves through space. They'll never say the word ether. It's funny. This dude even said the word fossil fuel, which is really funny. So the idea that we could create a defensive shield around the Earth that was complete is utterly laughable to the millionth degree. Could we cause problems for them? Yeah, probably. Now, some of you might remember the footage from NASA, which, again, big salt lick when I tell you this story because it's NASA's information, NASA's footage. But you remember this black and white footage of the sort of the curvature of Earth and these seemingly like little spaceships coming at Earth's surface and then bouncing off of our atmosphere, but also doing certain different movements like they were intelligent, not just maybe a meteorite bouncing off of the atmosphere sort of thing. But you also will remember the laser shots that were coming out of the Earth at these things, and that would make them move. Like, get away, Never been explained, but when my buddy told me the story about the plasma cannons, I was like, oh, maybe that's what they are. But again, Earth is a gigantic place. Africa doesn't have anything of any technology on its surface. I don't know how much Africa has satellites over its continent. The Pacific Ocean is gigantic. Atlantic Ocean is gigantic. If it's truly a globe, and then we got Antarctica down there where you're covering the South Pole too and the North Pole, you have to cover every single area. Otherwise, they're just going to find, oh, well, there's the door. We just descend through that door, just like Star Trek, and then we fly really low, so low to the ground. And no one's going to be able to touch us. So the idea that we can keep them out is a joke. Yeah, the idea that we could defeat them in any battle is a joke. But the idea is it's demonizing potentially a group of beings that would otherwise imbue us with solutions. The Skunkworks guy, said that they had actually developed machines that can, just like a tricorder, wave it over your body. It detects any illness in your body. But he specifically said that various agencies have taken that technology to the point where they can detect cancer and immediately cure the cancer using the machine without breaking the skin. I mean, again, easy tall tale told, right? There's a bit of a disconnect with the stories too, which is it seems that your average soldier who tells a story about anything UFO based that isn't part of this recent UAP push on TV, they're still usually always seeing a vehicle in one of two states, flying around, doing maneuvers that have sharp turns and all this other stuff, which again, you can cut and paste those. Once you hear that story one time, I could cut and paste that story into the show and tell you, oh gosh, guys, when I was on the beach the other day, I saw this. Watch me see it now in the next week and you won't believe me. But the other one is recovering craft. Either they're in the desert or they're in Peru. I got it wrong. It wasn't Chile, it was Peru. And so these other groups will show up at all times and tell them, you didn't see anything. Then you have Dr. Stephen Greer saying that we definitely have a bunch of these vehicles that we've created. My 2-degree relationship with the guy that just saw one take off in Area 51 that did exactly what the UAPs do. So think of the Tic Tac and what do they call it? The gimbal. And the other ones are all just military created things. They're simply testing them over and over and over again. They're most likely unmanned. And then you have the stories of, like the Skunkworks guy who says, and he's not the only one, there's a bunch of folks that have said that, especially during Eisenhower's reign, that they would meet either what are called the children or Greys, and that they are working with us to teach us how to fly these things. And this one Skunkworks guy talked about exactly how these vehicles are controlled. And those of you who've seen Pacific Rim, get ready for the story. But if we're in direct communication with these individuals, and they're helping us figure out how to fly their vehicles, which is what the story was from the Skunkworks guy, it sort of completely contradicts the story that now we're going to create a false flag in their name, demonize them, put a shield in space, and keep them out. Well, they're already here. They're already talking to us. So that doesn't make any sense. It's sort of like, I don't know. It's just predatorily bizarre behavior. So here's how the guy said that they fly their vehicles. He said that just think of Bob Lazar's sports model, the one I had land in the backyard in season 5. That vehicle. Inside, there are no sticks or anything, right? There's no 5-speed down on the floor there. There's a console. And that they actually are trained to be one with the vehicle mentally. And this is supposedly where we came up with our Apache helicopter helmets. It's a combination of thought process and waving their hand over this console. which apparently is made out of a lot of colors, very colorful display. And that one of the ways they can crash their ship is to be distracted from either their thought process with the console or their hands with the console, which seems, again, hard to believe. I mean, think about it. If a flight command system is that fragile, if somebody goes, "Hey, Bob, look at this," and you go, "Whoop," and then all of a sudden Roswell happens because you crash into the ground, I don't think that system is going to be allowed to be the major form of transport/control. The other one was a kid who was talking on behalf of his father, who I guess lied to the family, the whole family. And again, it's pretty believable. He said his family was a Mormon family, which is designed to give you a lot of credibility because they definitely are some salt of the earth folks. That his father said he was an optical technician and he was working for various companies, that he got on a 737 unmarked every morning to go to work. And apparently later, after he retired, he met with his father in Munich, Germany, because the son is in an import business, and that over a beer, of which his father never really consumed, in part due to his religion, he had a few drinks and he started unwinding with this kid. And he said, "Look, I've been lying to you. I worked at Area 51. He said that they had been given a technology developed by a university, which might be code for them, and that they tried to divide up the mechanism into two different groups so that they were blinded from each other and they weren't able to have the full recipe to Coke, if you will. That when they turned this first prototype on, it actually exploded because, again, you can't build a precision piece of technology in two different hemispheres, at least initially, right? You should put them all together initially, get it working, and then retire those guys, and then build a two-part group, right? I mean, imagine trying to build a Swiss watch for the very first time, and you got half the guys that don't know what the other half does. I mean, it's just absurd. But apparently, his father told him that the technology was organic in nature, and that he got the sense that this propulsion system actually had a consciousness of its own. Cue the TARDIS from Doctor Who. If you think about elements from the periodic table being organic in nature, and then Bob Lazar's sort of piezo effect engine, which is element 115, which we've had created on Earth since 2003 in the documentary with the I don't know, hipster wannabe with all of his tattoos all over him and all that stuff, he's the next alien guy. You know, that crazy guy with the funny hair that's in all the memes? He's the next one. Although the guy with the hair has actually got more integrity. At least he's letting you know what kind of person he is. And he might be right, who knows? But this director guy orchestrates this big phone call in the Bob Lazar special, I think was on Netflix, and pretends like 115 had never been made in the world. They called all these professors on the phone, and no, it had already been made. If that was a 2018 documentary, it had been made, for roughly 15 years. It's difficult to make, for sure, but it would be an organic element. Lazar's explanation of how the 115 was cut was absolutely brilliant. I mean, if this guy isn't telling the truth, he should write sci-fi novels, and I think he'd find, or sci-fi television shows, or being a consultant or something. But he said, imagine like coins, shapes, like cylinder shapes of 115 that might be like maybe 1/8 of an inch thick, and then you rotate them and stack them up like a roll of quarters. But you're rotating them so that when the piezo effect hits, you're actually controlling the electromagnetic field that's going to come out of these things in a very augmented way. And then you shave it down like a cone. And that particular shape of 115, when resonated properly, gives off a massive surge of probably electromagnetic fields, which runs inside this internal architecture of the vehicle, which is 3 arches that go down to antimatter engines that are hanging in the basement of the ship, which are on rotational things, right? It's brilliant. I mean, if it's not real, it is utterly brilliant. And that the 115's in this little disc inside the center of the vehicle. I actually 3D modeled it because I was going to put myself inside the the space sports model, but I could never get the shot to look right, even though I modeled it exactly the way the schematic is supposed to be. It just was uninteresting on the inside. So we're just trying to tie some stuff together here, right? I think for 2021, this is going to be the topic that everyone will want to get up on as soon as possible, because in order to sniff it out, we're going to have to pay attention. And just to give you an analogy, think about Bill Cooper, who I think in May of 2001 predicts September 11th. Literally says, CNN just interviewed this guy. The whole world's been trying to kill this guy. They got in without any problem, interviewed him. So they're preparing him to take the fall for something coming up. Of course, September 11th happens. Bill Cooper gets killed, I think, in like November or something of the same year. And so we had no Bill Cooper brain set before 9/11 happens, right? Except for maybe some people listened to his podcast back in the day. I wasn't one of those people. I was so stupid the day that happened. I was buying everything, right? But now with the UAP invasion potentially being on the deck, we can get ourselves informed across the board. So when this stuff starts happening, it's not that it won't happen, let's just say, but they may do their simulation and go, oh shit, too many people figured this out. It's not going to be having the effect that we want it to. No one's going to go for it. And we tend to try to keep people blue-pilled for as long as possible, but now this theory is getting out. Now it's now causing a red pill cascade. Now, what's interesting is a bunch of the people that are supposedly, they're definitely confessing something on tape to Stephen Greer. Most of his stuff was published in 2013. A gigantic collection of these videos are done in 2013. So everything's about 8 years old at this point. But they'll say stuff like, I am coming forth because, one, you have integrity, Mr. Greer and Dr. Greer, and that's why I'm doing this. That's cool. I like it. And again, there's definitely several folks that have spoken on those interviews that I think are 100%. This notion, I'm trying to think if I should finish my thought here first to give you another example. I'll finish the example. So the example is this. They will say, I'm coming forth because there's technology being hidden from humanity that will solve world hunger, solve all of our fossil fuel problems, basically make this a utopia on planet Earth. And then they proceed never to disclose any of that information. Bring a schematic, would you? Let's actually affect the world in a way that's positive. They never do. Now, this documentary that Dr. Greer is supposed to be coming out with here in June is supposed to be revealing some of the actual internal top secret schematics for the UAPs that we ourselves have built. So I'm very interested to see that, and he's going to put it out. He wants everyone to download the video and re-upload it, do episodes on it, whatever you want to do. He wants 1 million people to redistribute this thing as widely as possible. That's pretty cool. The thing is too, is it's one of these things, if I was selling something as a result of a claim that I can't prove, technically speaking, like I can claim and make it make sense to you, right? I could draft up something and make a UFO design based on all my sciences, and if it just looks convincing, well, you can't build it, you can't test it. So it's like Bob Lazar drawing what he supposedly worked on. Well, maybe that works, maybe it doesn't work. But if I'm selling something, then I think my integrity is in question automatically, which is why I think I was told by my friend who talked to him for 4 hours or so, 4 or 5 hours, that he won't talk to just anybody. And that's, obviously you don't want to talk to a jerk, someone who's not going to have any decent questions. Remember that time when you said, Chris Farley thing? I understand that, but talking to anyone who's really has a genuine soul to try and, prove it one way or the other, I'd like to get involved with what his scientific method is for vetting interviews. Why not look at an interview and go, my God, you notice every time he talks about a UFO, he touches his ear. These guys pull on their ears. It's bizarre, man. Just download a few of the videos that he's posted. And, the more polished and older and higher ranking individuals who really are in the military, high ranking, get into these conversations, you think they'd be smooth as glass, right? oh man, they're pulling on your ears, right? Rubbing their face and stuff. And you're like, oh, you feel really uncomfortable telling this little story here. Well, the people that I trust in those interviews, the sort of nobodies or the professors who aren't technically involved in being afraid of a general, they're able to tell their stories, boom, just like that, except the guy in the Navy, but he wasn't. He was military. That kid just had communication issues. God bless him. The thing about the Navy story that struck me as interesting, because I'm always looking for details that we wouldn't think of. The one detail I thought he added to the story, which seems above his current level of creativity based on the way he speaks, was the boat tipping over a tremendous amount when lifting this thing out of the water. It didn't seem like he was going to volunteer any details until Dr. Greer kind of pushed him. And Dr. Greer asked the right questions. I will say, man, he's like, okay, well, why don't you describe that? And it's almost like the kid was going to walk past a ton of details unless kind of prodded to do so. Okay. It's weird. You'd think it would be okay, so imagine you have been holding these stories in for a very, very long time. And now you're about to come out and you're about to talk about it publicly. You would think you would have a bit of concern, and of course they're going to get pissed at you and come after you, but once you give the story out, it's just punishment at that point. It's not anything new as long as you tell your story complete and you're not withholding some little kernel of information, right? So I don't understand the hesitation during these interviews, and some folks don't hesitate at all. Again, I would say the most believable interviews I've seen are guys that are fed up with being harassed. It's not even the first time they've told the story, yet they've been harassed for 20, 30 years after they confessed the first time. But this kid, this Navy Guam guy, he was so hesitant. It was like, come on, if you're stressed out about this and you've had a bad life because of this, which is the tail end of the interview, this is your moment to just shine. Just get it all off your chest, as much details as you want. But this guy was so nervous, he almost looked like he had cerebral palsy in his hands because he was just really just crawling into a ball while he was saying some of his sentences as slow as you possibly could, right? Again, he's probably just not a real big communicator in his life, you know. And I understand that it happens to some people, right? For me, it and plus my own little experience, my little gray alien experience at a Christmas thing, you know, I have no problem at all believing that these things are real. Roswell, again, like I said many times in other episodes, went out to disprove it. Now I believe it. And I know some of you still want to just sort of like broad stroke not believe it. I understand, man. I've been there for decades and decades and decades of going, this is all bullshit. This is all military vehicles. They're just trying to make, other countries like Russia think that we have more technology than they do, which we might, who knows, right? Apparently, one of the biggest retired generals, in fact, I guess there's 2 or 3 of them now that Dr. Greer talked about, they have fully disclosed that, yeah, we are not on this planet alone. They've been here for God knows how many years. And what I think is really funny is that the Skunkworks guy was like trying to say something super profound. And I think he might be largely full of crap. But again, because he's one of these super high ranking guys, anyone touches their face, I just cancel the interview, man. I'll watch it all the way through because I want to hear the archetypes of the latest Bigfoot story they're talking, because other guys like him are going to say the same story, and none of the guys I believe are going to say those stories. It's like I watched a bunch of YouTube videos and now I'm going to take my crack at it, you know. It's like the PSYOP training ground called Coast to Coast AM. But they'll try to make this claim like they've been here for 100 years, maybe 200 years, and maybe 1,000 years. And it's like, you think that's a profound statement? I mean, seriously, you think that we've got Peruvian, illustrations on the ground of big giant ants and other geometric shapes and other things, lizards and people, and what explains that besides someone seeing something from outer space? Again, Egyptian symbols for month and year are two spheres, one filled, which is the sun, and one outlined, which is the moon. How do they know? How do they know? You know, all the stories we've ever heard of, like angels coming down and, you know, breeding the Nephilim that breed with humanity, could just be them. And what could they possibly have thought? Every time one of us from Europe went to the Americas, we had to convince the natives that we weren't aliens, angels or something from heavens or something like that, which may have been a lost, in translation. You imagine Native Americans are like always looking up at the sky going, well, they come out of the sky. And then now it comes across the ocean. They're like, oh, are you one of them? You know, it's the Magellan story of finding the giant on the coast of South America in the 1530s. And he said that they brought him on board. He was doing some weird ritual. He's all naked. He's throwing sand in the air and just singing and dancing. And he gets on the deck of the ship and he points at the sky like, is that where you're from? Interesting, right? That's a point of reference for him. Up. And there's that amazing scene from Close Encounters of the Third Kind where the French guy is going up to a PA and I believe he's in India. And they're playing the notes and he's showing the hand signals. And he said to them, you know, where did these lights come from? Where did these people come from that you met? And they have this, Spielberg do this amazing shot where he shoots right over the head of everyone up to the podium. And it's like 5,000 hands going boom, pointing straight at the sky. Interesting, man. You know, the one thing that doesn't make sense to me, and this is why Dr. Greer needs someone else outside of his circle to talk to him, is what would be the point in taking a superior, apparently 12 races. According to Dr. Greer's 2001 thing, it was 27. 27 to 12 superior races, which can travel through dimensions interstellarly. Who the hell knows where the hell we are, what we're inside of. But they can travel at will. And a bunch of sort of Neanderthal primitives on this planet called us are going to suddenly try to make them demonized to the universe. I think it'd be hilarious. They're in the middle of their little cosmic threat moment, their other false flag or whatever it is, and then they're just tired of it. And they just deploy. They wipe all those vehicles out and just land on everyone's driveway. Come out and like, what's up, dude? What was it? For those of you who saw the Muppet movie about Gonzo, what was it? The Shooting Star. They did a lot of Cool in the Gang songs where he's basically from this super cool kind of P-Funk planet. And they're all like, hey, man, what's going on when they show up? It was one of the greatest, I think it's the best Muppet movie since the first one. But there's a lot of other good. The pirate one was actually really great too. Isn't that funny? I'm dating myself by going back to my childhood. Well, actually, I played those for my daughter. That's how I found the Gonzo one. If you're interested in the UAP thing, if you're interested in the UFO thing, I'm sure that you're already digesting this information, but here's why I want to make more of these videos. I'm still hearing people just parroting and repeating the narratives off, especially the official news stories of UAPs, as if it's just fact. Why would they lie to me? You know, I got this couple that came to visit us. God bless them. They're wonderful people. But they would echo the UAP thing verbatim. Gotta be real. Oh, I don't know why they're always in military airspace and not in pedestrian space. It never occurred to them until we had the conversation tonight that they should be flying over Los Angeles, New York, whatever, right? But then they were like, oh, the election was definitely stolen. Oh, okay, so the press doesn't tell you the truth about that, but it tells you the truth about UAPs. Make up your mind which one is right, because it's either all bullshit or it's all true. And I think we kind of know which way it goes at this point. irrespective of your political affiliation, right? There are so many serious disclosure interviews. I'm not exactly sure how many weeks and months it would take one to watch them all, but I'm going to start digesting quite a few of them. I think the thing we can say officially is with all the stories that we've ever been told, including my grandmother, probably about 1920, seeing flying cigars over Kansas, which she has never said anything like that in my life. With her sister, she said, that was the interesting thing. She said, me and my sister used to sit and watch flying cigars over the plains in Texas, plains in Kansas, sorry. She was from a place called Erie, which I think is E-R-I-E. And the only difference might be 2 E's in the front. I can't remember. So Southeast Kansas, her and her sister used to watch these things. And the way she told it was that it happened so often that they could always see them. Well, I don't think we had blimp technology out there in 1920. And if that was the case, people would take photographs of, oh, here's the blimps from Germany, right? Nope. That's what, she just said, flying cigars. And there are photographs of those on the internet, but they're actually super hard to find nowadays. It's really interesting. The nuke thing, I think, is very interesting that they would show up, and because I believe these stories of these guys, there's too many occurrences of them deactivating missiles. And what the guy said was very interesting. He said, we think it's an electromagnetic field that disturbed the guidance systems and threw them off. And he said very specifically, these Titan missiles at the time had one external power system from like the normal power plants attached to the vehicle, but that there was no indication that there was any power surges. They did a full investigation on the thing. And eventually, at the very end of his particular base, which they all have little code names, and apparently it was just north of the 57 here in California, which is about, his thing was about maybe 15 miles from where I'm sitting. Consequently, where all the chemtrails come out of, just slightly north of that zone, that secret marine base up there. You just see them fan out like it's over my right shoulder. They're all the trails are all fanned out from that location. It's just, oh, really? Not coming out of LAX, not coming out of John Wayne Airport. But he said that they were told not to file a final report, and that everyone in that, division of his world were stopping their investigation, and it was all boiled up, or bubbled up, I should say, and that it was taken to a much higher level, and that's where it was going to be dealt with. I guess because what's the story behind nuclear weapons? And yes, I do think they faked footage of, buildings being blown down and trees being blown and all that kind of stuff. I do think they faked that stuff, but that's just propaganda for everyone else to see. It doesn't mean they can't pierce an atom and create a fission reaction, right? Ask Madame Curie. But, we did like the Philadelphia project, right, where we're isolating uranium, was it 234, 235, and creating plutonium. Very coarse plutonium at the time. And apparently these vehicles, which I guess the first major interaction for the United States military was in 45. Some guy dropped the 1945 date and didn't talk about which one it was and where it was. But why wouldn't they have struck or deactivated the uranium or whatever they do? It's never been said. Again, what I said the other day about the missile silo thing, and I didn't know how they deactivated them. They didn't apparently neutralize the explosive. They neutralized the guidance system to create a failure. But it looked like they had shown up, were analyzing the vehicle, and said, if we're talking for them, if we just get rid of the guidance system, the way the program is set up, it's going to shut down the missile. So let's just nail that, and then they'll all shut off. Basically sending a message more than anything else, right? My question is, why wait so long to take that action? Did it take them personally 20 years from 47 to 67 to make that decision? It doesn't seem like they're that type of being. In terms of them helping us craft aircraft to get to perhaps where they're from. That might make more sense to me, right? Remember at the end of Close Encounters, Richard Dreyfuss gets in the red jumpsuit and gets his briefcase, and he's going to get on that mothership and take off. And he turns back and looks at the woman on the hill who just got her kid back from the spaceship, and he's just giving her a wink like, you know where I'm going. I will never see you again. So us going to them, I understand that. That makes sense. Now going to the moon, I don't know why that would be the case. And here's what I also don't understand. Every single night the moon is under great scrutiny by telescopes. And yes, there are claims of videos, and maybe this adds validity to them, that there's little tiny craft, little tiny white dots that are sort of roaming the surface of moon. But at some point they would land, and I know a lot of you be like, they're on the dark side of the moon. Hey, only Pink Floyd's on the dark side of the moon. Maybe, I guess. What's the point? A staging area where they can take off and land and no one's going to see? I guess that makes kind of sense, but there's so many islands all over the world that aren't even on Google Maps. They're just erased. But if they needed to, they could get them erased. There's the South Pole. There's just, there's weird areas in the United States. I don't know. Maybe that is just absolutely a place to be where we could take off and stuff. But why would a special forces guy be so depressed coming back from the moon? If you went off on a military operation, I've got buddies of mine who are Rangers, former Rangers. Well, they're Rangers now, but they're not active duty. And yeah, they had to do a lot of really dirty shit in the Middle East. And they come back and they don't feel great because they maybe took out women and children, did something else. They know the war is based on bullshit. Who knows, right? What could be happening on the moon that would make a soldier go, God, you just don't even know what I'm having to hide. It does seem too that almost in this climate that one could find a way to live stream and just give it all up. It just depends. I mean, if there's something impending, right, where it's like, yes, we're taking over the world. All human beings are going to die, but don't you dare say anything, it's like at some point, some guy's going to go, I'm not holding this back. I'm going to tell you I'm holding it back. Some of you are awake enough to remember Pat Tillman, who came back from the Middle East. He said, oh my God, everything I saw over there, it's all bullshit. This whole thing was fake. But he's going to go back and finish his tour. When he gets back, he's going to petition against the war. And then he's shot by an Afghan freedom fighter 3 feet from his face. So yeah, you got to be careful when you're going to disclose something, I guess. And that's why I don't know how Dr. Greer gets a hold of anybody being so protective. What if a guy wants to give his story out there and he's impossible to reach out to, or you got to send an email to get him to respond? Well, that email is going to get tracked in 2 seconds. If you are one of these Q clearance kind of special forces guy, which he would definitely be Q clearance and maybe even above. What's interesting is sort of the chatter around this subject matter is almost nil. We have the videos coming out. We got interviews out there, but it's like everyone's just kind of, brain dead watching this stuff, not talking about it, right? And yes, there's MUFON organizations and focus groups on this kind of stuff. I expect those organizations to exist and mulch over this kind of content in great detail, but what I don't expect is the average public to not talk about it, right? I know we got a lot of going on, but isn't this interesting? I mean, it's exciting because we're on the precipice of someone making a move. That's what's interesting to me, which is why I want to advance the narrative or our discussion, I should say, no narratives, but just our discussion on our analysis on the narrative, so that whatever occurs, we have a very educated mind about it. We've contemplated every possibility so we don't panic on the day it occurs. I don't know, again, the whole idea of like them creating some cataclysmic event and blaming it on UFO people, which again are watching if they exist and could easily intervene and go, I don't think so, which I think would be utterly hilarious, right? That's what I hope happens. I mean, wouldn't that be the greatest thing in the world? The day they plan to destroy the world with, not the world, but I mean, destroy our perception of reality through this UAP fake invasion thing, and then the real dudes show up, neutralize those guys, and land. Don't you want to be calm and cool on that day and not freaking out, you know? But think about what an attack could be. Let's just give that a little bit of credence for a few seconds. All right, you blow up a building? What the hell for? What would an alien care about hurting a building? You gonna, I don't know, laser Florida? I mean, what is the deal? What are you gonna do? It makes no sense to demonstrate power. We don't need any demonstrations of power. We just need to have them land, make their demands if they're real. Then we deny those demands as a planet, and then they make a demonstration which hurts no one but shows us. You see this blank field in Kansas. They just blow a giant crater in it and then go, "That's what we'll do to you if." We do it all the time on playgrounds, all the time, right? I'll get you, you know. Punch a wall, you know. See what I did to that wall? That's your face, man. And then everyone's like, "Oh, okay, I don't want my face to look like that wall." We all panicked in September of 2001. I mean, I've said it before, I'm going to repeat it here, of how stupid we could be by showing my own ignorance. When that occurred, some dude, I was living in the Bay Area, San Mateo, California. Some dude had a big all-American truck, probably 20 years old. He put 2 giant American flags on it. And we needed that energy. We needed to reconstitute ourselves based on whatever happened. But he put a big wooden sign on the front of his truck that he painted. And it said, "Nuke 'em." And he drove around. And I remember thinking, yes, do it. Do it. Just show them what we're made out of so this shit stops. And that was the stupidest thing on planet Earth. It had nothing to do with it. Who are you going to nuke, right? And so I fell for it. I was, I guess I was going to turn, no, I was 32 when that happened. And I was a complete, ridiculously stupid social person at the time. I confused Sikhs with Arabs, you know. It was just like, it was stupid, right? I never said anything to anyone negative, right? I never walked up to anybody, "You guys," you know, never did that. Heard some stories. One guy who was Arab in our neighborhood, apparently, he walked into some hardware store because he was like a general contractor, I guess. And I guess I talked to the guy that ran the store, and the dude walked in the day after. You know, how stupid is this, man? And he walked right up to that guy with a big grin on his face, and he said, "We got you this time." And the dude just looked at him like, "What? Like, you're proud that you're taking credit?" I mean, the stupid thing was he took credit for something his people didn't do. And he said, "Get the fuck out of my store forever." And the guy was surprised. And it was like, what? If I'm sitting in an Arab country and Americans attacked them, and I wouldn't walk into the local store and go, "We got you." Ha ha ha. Oh my God. The idiocy of some people. But anyway, let me know what you think. Let's keep the conversation flowing. I'm interested in, you know, the most detailed analysis you can give me in a comment. If for those of you who make videos, again, I love it. There's one of you that makes videos. You show me, you know, you post in the comments, "Hey, I made another video." Love that stuff, right? This should be a video exchange of ideas. You should be doing your deep thoughts on this kind of stuff because it's important. And again, one of you will probably boil this whole thing down to a beautiful, simple statement that will help all of us. So have faith in yourself and your communication capabilities. But anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. Please understand the channel is under huge attack by its provider. Today, in 5 minutes, I refresh. It was at 48:44. 5 people came on board, so it was 49. 5 minutes later, back to 44. The odds of that are astronomical. They're always going in 5 packs because an odd number, I guess, is more believable in their minds. So we are being ganked. You guys are being kicked off of the subscriptions. So I say we shove it up their hole by promoting the channel just to break their algorithm. We can't get over 5,000. They won't let it happen because apparently there's some alkalate at 5,000 where maybe psychologically they know it gains more credibility. Maybe it kicks off some other positive thing for the channel, and they will not let us get over that. We don't have that much to get over to get to 5,000. So pick an episode that you dig. Remember, 520 is the ultimate moon episode, but there's 26, there's 165, there's some 300s of all the moon stuff. Just go to the website, click on NASA moon mission category on the right side. Pick one you like, throw it out to your friends, see what we can do to get this thing going to the top. If you have multiple accounts on YouTube, make sure all of them are subscribed just to boost us. But let's try to break that, because I'm sick and tired of their games. BitChute, it just goes up. I mean, we might lose one in a month, but two come back within a week. So, yeah, do me a solid. Like and subscribe, man. Like and subscribe. We got video, audio, social media links. We have all new remastered season 1, a store, and to all the Patreons and PayPal folks, thank you so much. We're doing a lot of new stuff over at Patreon. We have up to 5 fireside chats at this point. And I've actually encouraged people to give me interview questions over there. And so we're making videos. Just get in for $1. You get the episodes at least a day before everybody else. Plus, again, your own unique content. If you get up to a certain dollar amount, you and I will do a face-to-face, or FaceTime, I should say, like I always say wrong. And we'll get to know each other a little bit. So anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now. To go to the moon. Oh my God. God damn. Holy fucking shit. That was loud as fuck. Oh my God. Put that at the bloopers. Okay. You guys probably can't hear that, but it's some chick yelling, "If you want to diss me, I will fuck you up, bitch." You can't hear it. I can see the track. There's no register of her screaming and yelling. It's weird to have a bomb go off that's about the size, it's about a TNT stick, and then this chick is yelling all of a sudden. Oh, Huntington Beach, I love you so much.